City Commission meeting of Monday, January 8th, 2017. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. First thing up is the order of business. Mr. Kessel.
President Decker, I do have one suggested order of business change, and that is to delay the North Parking Lot report from this commission meeting to the next City Commission meeting. And I believe that is the only change that we'd make recommendation for.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Kessel or comments on the change in the order of business?
I'd make the recommendation to approve the agenda as amended.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the amended order of business.
Second.
With a second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The order of business is passed. Consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that commissioners would like to discuss?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. With a second. Any further questions or comments for staff on the consent agenda? Not, we'll vote. Mr. Altmans?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Consent agenda is passed. We have no timetable events tonight, so we'll move right into non-timetable agenda. And the first thing up is our 2018 fee schedule amendment. And that'll be handled by Deputy City Administrator Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. On the screen, you can see that under Building and Code Enforcement, it wasn't caught at the time of proposing the fee schedule to you, but it shows that the fee for up to $1,000 was $50, but then after the first $1,000, it was lower than the original amount, and that was supposed to be at $60. So that was a type error, and I'm asking for a resolution to amend the 2018 fee schedule to incorporate the new amount in there that was missed, and that was an error on the finance side.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Carlson. Any questions for Mrs. Carlson on Resolution 16-2017 and amending it? If not, I would look for a
Move to
motion.
approve, Mr. President.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
with a second on 16-2017, the amendment. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Carlson, Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich,
Aye.
Mr. Altman,
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The amended 16-2017 is passed. Next up is the 2015 audit report. Mrs. Carlson?
Thank you. At the first, the other commission meeting that I brought the audit report to for the 2015, it was in my error that I did not realize that I needed to have the approval. What the screens are showing is I'm going to go back through the findings that were in the audit. And as I put in front of you, these are the actual finalized financial reports for 2015 that were just completed on December 27th or 28th, just before the end of the year. So I wanted to go back into the findings, and that's what I had brought to you as a draft of the findings. So I've just kind of paraphrased it, and I just want to go back through on that. But to start with, the year ended on 12/31/15. There were 2 audit reports that were done. The actual financial statement, which is the bigger book, and then the federal awards, which is the A133 report, which states all of our federal awards. They are audited separately on that. The city had the same 4 findings in 2015 as we did in 2014. And there were no findings on the 2015 for the federal awards. So we did very good as far as federal awards go on that. On the next screen, thank you. The first finding, which is recording of transaction, and the cause was certain adjustments were overlooked in closing of the year end. And so some of that, again, was your fixed assets, your capital improvements, and post-closure. And if you look in the back of your smaller federal award book, you will see that you will have the adjusting journal entries, and some of those are what are year-end closing. And we went through on these with the auditor, and there's, I think, 11 or 12, I can't remember, audit journal entries. There's at least 6 of them that should not occur in the next one, because we went through them, we discussed them, found out why they were adjusted journal entries. One of them I can state to you is the fact that when you're working with a budget, you work the calendar year, so what you receive in January is booked in January. But when you're looking at treasurer's report, sales tax, things like that, those taxes are actually for 2 months in the previous. So you have to adjust the journal entry to bring those transactions to actual audit transactions. So those are things that we know now that staff didn't know at the time, and then those are audit entries that the auditor had to make, which should not show up in the next audits. Okay? So with that, I made the management response that the city did hire a 5th person in finance. This allows for the 2 accountants to be fully focused on financial reporting and year-end balance sheets. So that should help remedy that. The next one, 215B, is preparation of financial report. In auditing, when you're putting this book together, auditors, you have a choice of auditors putting the financial notes together with the help of the finance team, or the actual finance team actually puts all the financial notes in there to be audited. For 15 and going forward to 16, finance is not going to. We will be helping them put that, but because of the cost and the training of putting the financial notes together, that is just not liable to be taken down right now. But in the future, we will be putting the financial notes in there so that we won't have that finding. Okay. 215C, segregation of duties. This is concerning again, shorts in staff for finance. You might have somebody that's actually putting a deposit in, and then you didn't have the next person looking at it and second initials on it, things like that, that were segregation of duties. You need to have more than one eye that's actually doing the transaction. It needs to be overlooked. With the 5th person coming in that you approved for just taking over the payroll, we actually now have 2 accountants, so we have 3 of us. Besides myself, we have 2 people that are actually, one's doing the transaction, one's reviewing the transaction, I'm approving the transaction. So now we have a good process to work on that. And then the last one, 215D, department controls over cash. This is a lot like the 215C where it's segregation of duties. There's people that are taking cash in, making up the deposit slip, and then bringing the deposit down. You have to have that segregation of duties. A lot of this is just not in finance. This is also in departments. So the processes of doing cash receipting is going to be looked at so that we have better processes where a manager, supervisor is also looking at. The other thing that I would like to, in management response, is that the process of documenting the cash receipts becomes automatic through our system, our audit system, so that you have that audit trail that we can use electronically through our Great Plains software system. So all that is in the works, but these were the 2015 audit, but they were the same as 14, and with all the change of staff and everything, it just didn't get addressed and stuff, so now it will be. I would be more than happy to answer any questions on the financial report or any of the findings that were presented. If anybody has any questions on anything.
Any questions for Mrs. Carlson on the audit.
And then I'm also asking for an approval.
Well, I would just say nobody ever likes to find any reporting in an audit situation, but when you look back at where our staffing was and how hard it was to find a qualified person for the position, sounds like you and your team went in and cleaned everything up, and that in the future we shouldn't have these types of reportings going on.
Well, I thank you for that. We will work towards that. I don't think we'll have them all cleaned up, but we will work towards that. But I really appreciate
I
that, because
really-
staff is really, really understanding now what's enticed in this whole audit situation. We're going right into the 2016 and then right into the 2017, back to back. So they will have plenty of chances to work on this, so.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Mhm.
Good.
Any further questions for Mrs. Carlson, comments? So you are anticipating much of the same or for 16? Or everything will be corrected for 16?
16 should have a lot less or adjusting journal entries from the auditors. That's the last few pages in that the littler book. And you are always going to have some audit entries that have to be adjusted by the auditor to bring your books up to par, because we work on a budget basis and not on a cash basis. So you're always going to have a few, but I think that what you're looking for is no more than 5 audit entries, and you should have, my goal is to have only like one finding. They have to find something, but one finding is all that you should have in a financial report, and nothing in federal.
Okay.
I think this will really help us next year going into the budget season to have an updated
I think so too.
financial statement.
Yeah, we ran into some surprises
Yes.
this budget season based on where we thought some different accounts
Yes.
values were, but that's from years of not having a cohesive team with a leader. So I think you're right, moving forward, we should be in a much better position.
Okay, any other comments, questions? I know it's a lot to digest. There's a lot of info in these books, so.
I would make a motion to approve the 2015 audit.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the 2015 audit.
Second.
And a second. Any further questions or comments for Mrs. Carlson? Not, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The 2015 audit is approved.
Thank you.
Next up is the 2018 tobacco license. Mr. Kessel.
Thank you. At a previous commission meeting, you approved a long list of tobacco licenses. Absent from that list was the Guru Vape Shop, and I believe I called out the fact that they didn't reapply. They have since applied for a 2018 tobacco license. The application is complete. Their fees are paid, and we are recommending approval. I thought it was interesting to note that they also have to obtain a state tobacco license, and until we provide our local license, they cannot get or obtain a state license. So this is an important document for them, not only for our purposes, but also for their state license.
Was it just a clerical error on their part that it wasn't filed, or?
That is correct. They simply didn't file their application, not a clerical error on our part.
And then they're not operating, I would take it right now, until they.
They are not supposed to be operating because they don't have a license for these few days here in January of 2018.
Is there a late fee applied to them?
I just actually spoke with Attorney Murtha about that. We do not have the authority by our ordinance to charge a late fee, but that is something that we would like to bring to you, is the possibility of implementing a late fee. Not necessarily to charge it, but to encourage compliance in 2017, for instance, so that we don't have to.
Well, we don't want 15 late ones coming in at a time, so we gotta have some sort of a late fee. Obviously, it could be abused with the liquor licenses also the same way, so.
We don't have a late fee on liquor either, right?
No, I'm glad, but we can certainly, as I mentioned, Ms. Murtha and I were talking about that just prior to the beginning of the commission meeting tonight, and we plan to bring you a revised ordinance and probably a revised fee schedule that will include a late fee.
And this would be one where we're not creating a fee just to create a fee. We're creating a fee because they have caused us additional time and work from city staff.
That's correct.
We need to be reimbursed for that.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the Guru Vape tobacco license? Not, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the Guru Vape Shop application for 2018, I guess it would be.
Second.
Second. We have a motion to approve with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Not, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The Guru Vape license is approved. Next up, we're on to reports. Excuse me. Item number 1 has been removed, so we're on to the NLLC March Madness training. Mr. Kessel.
Thank you. In your packets, you have the possibility of additional training. The North Dakota League of Cities puts on what they call March Madness every year. This year it'll be held on March 6th and 7th. It'll be in Bismarck at the Radisson Hotel. You have a copy of the training itself. I just want to caution everyone that March 6th is a city commission meeting, so we would either need to change that, cancel that, or somehow deal with it if the quorum of the commission would rather attend the North Dakota League of Cities training. If you are interested, please let myself know or Ms. Binstock. We do have some hotel rooms reserved already in anticipation of not only some city commissioners attending, but also city staff. So that would end my report on that. The last night item that I have then is just some thank you notes. Generally, I don't make a whole lot of comment about thank you notes, but this time I do. I would like to because of some of the size and because there was a change on one of the grants that the commission made. The Theodore Roosevelt Regional Airport, you made a grant for $250,000. They have received those funds, and they just wanted to say thank you for those funds. I did talk to the airport manager personally, and he was very, very pleased. The Belfield Cemetery Association also received funds from the Southwest Grant and provided a thank you. And then Elder Care, just at the last City Commission meeting, you voted to provide them with just under a $3,000 grant to continue with nutrition services in Mott region. After talking to Ms. Radikowski, who runs that program, she mentioned that they are going to rent the equipment instead of purchase it. They'll purchase some, but they'll be able to rent some instead of buying it, and that'll save some dollars. And so they intend to return anywhere between $400 and $500 back to the city of the 28 that we have provided. So that would conclude my reports and the thank yous for this evening, unless there's questions.
Any questions for Mr. Kessel on either the March Madness or the thank you notes? Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Next up, we have the Fire Department 2017 Safety Program, Fire Chief Seebach. And in this case, Safety Coordinator, Robert Seebach.
Thank you. Good evening, President Decker, Commissioners. This evening, we are going to present to you the City of Dickinson's 2017 Annual Safety Report. It does encompass all departments, not just the Fire Department. There we go. Total incidents in 2017 were 49. 19 of those incidents required medical attention. 30 did not require medical attention, but did require reporting. Of those 30, 11 were strictly a property damage type of event. City vehicle runs into a post or another vehicle or something like that. That does come to our program as a property damage report. So how does that look compared to previous years? That's the lowest total overall injuries we've had for the past 5 consecutive years. So we finally succeeded in doing what we were striving to do all this time, was lower our incident rates. So 49 incidents. The last time it was below 50 was 2011. We're proud of that. One of the goals that we had was to lower sprains and strains, which on a yearly basis is our leading type of incident. We wanted to lower the sprain and strain category of incidents by 10%, and we were successful in doing that. You'll see that if a citizen is injured on city property, we do have a record of that also between us and between HR. That is recorded. Sometimes insurance claim may result from that, sometimes not, but there is a form that we have for that. Safety concern reports. In 2017, we had just addressed 3 safety concern reports that came to us from our employee base. Our audit results. The City of Dickinson has adopted the North Dakota Workforce Safety and Safety Management Program and Safety Action Menu Program. Those are all worth a certain percentage of discount to us if we successfully complete them, to a maximum discount of 15% off of our premium dollar. City of Dickinson Safety Manual must reflect the changes that we've got in our Human Resource Manual now. This is one of the goals we have to work towards in 2018. We have to make sure one document doesn't conflict with or is vastly different from the other document. Revisions are underway for the Drug-Free Workplace Program in order to pass the audit next year. It's one of them that we fell short on a technicality, quite honestly, where it was just a record-keeping type of thing that we weren't totally clear on with Workforce Safety's program guidelines. It's something that we can address, and we have already begun to, and will address it. That's where you see the Drug-Free Workplace Program with the failed. In essence, the body of the program is in place. It did work. It was a technicality on a couple of trainings that were presented and what they were supposed to include as compared to what they did include. Something that we're aware of and that we will fix in the coming year. The Learning Management Program, that's our online resource program, Learning Management System program. There's some discussion between us, HR, and the safety end of things, and Workforce Safety. There's a discrepancy in how many total courses were completed and weren't completed. So at this point in time, that's still pending. I'm not sure if we'll be successful with that one or not, but we have passed enough of the other program menu items to obtain the full 15% discount allowed. And that's the end of my report.
Any questions for Chief Sivak? Or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next up, we have the Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's National Academy Program. Chief Dosnier.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Recently, the Dickinson Police Department had the opportunity to send one of our members to the National FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Tonight, I'd like to take the opportunity to allow that individual, Sergeant Kylan Klauser, to talk about some of the training and experiences that he received while attending that academy and how it's going to benefit our community and the police department. This time, I'd like to welcome Sergeant Kylan Klauser up to the podium, please.
Mayor Decker, Commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to come up tonight and visit with you guys about the National Academy. I know there's been a couple articles out there that you guys maybe have read and had a chance to see. I know I've had a conversation with a couple of you pertaining to it specifically since I've arrived back in Dickinson just before Christmas time. But the program itself that I was fortunate enough to attend, it's a program that takes a nomination by a department head, and I received that nomination by Chief Dossinger 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And so it was quite a lengthy process leading up to your acceptance and the scheduling and getting in. But once a decision is made and you're in, the program itself consists of 10 weeks of a number of different things. There's 220 of us, 225 of us that are in each section or each class from all over the nation. There's 20 different countries that are present throughout that time as well. And so some of the focal points of the program are specifically towards emerging trends in our profession of law enforcement, some of the things that we're dealing with right now, some of the false narratives and how to combat some of these things from the departmental standpoint. some emerging trends from the technological standpoint, some leadership principles, enhancing partnerships and communication amongst agencies and in-house as well. So the total time there was, like I said, 10 weeks, 11 weeks if you count Thanksgiving in there. Our section was strung out a little bit longer because of that Thanksgiving holiday time. But yeah, so I was out there at Quantico, Virginia is where that is hosted at, which is south of Washington, D.C. by about 20 miles. And this particular section was special in the sense, as maybe some of you saw, President Trump was present for the graduation speech. And so that was the first time in 46 years he had been there. And the first time ever in the, as I was told, in the history of the FBI, that the President, the Attorney General, Chief of Staff, and the FBI Director were in the same room at the FBI Academy. So a very special moment for myself to be representing the City of Dickinson and the Dickinson Police Department. It's something I'm very humbled and proud to talk about. I'm thankful to Chief Dossinger and the department and the City of Dickinson and anybody who had a part in me going out there. Some questions, I guess, that were given to me right away upon my return. I know Commissioner Frederick, we talked real briefly kind of about how that worked out there as far as what the FBI picked up and things. And so really the Dickinson Police Department was responsible for my hourly wage while I was out there. But other than that, the FBI picks up the rest of the expenses. So room and board, food, and all of that were paid for. I flew out there. I did not have a vehicle provided to me, so I flew in and I Ubered down to Quantico, and so I was there and bummed a ride, I guess you could say, for the 10 weeks from some buddies and from some different agencies and things, but made it just fine. It made it for a close networking and to build some close relationships with some of these guys that I was able to meet and had a good time doing that. So I don't know if anybody has any questions specifically about that, but be sure happy to answer anybody's.
Any questions or comments for Sergeant Clauser?
Sergeant Clauser, what an amazing opportunity. I can't imagine how special that was. What would you say is the most valuable thing you're bringing back to the community?
I think the amount of connections the Dickinson Police Department has throughout our profession, you know, 225 law enforcement officers from all over the world, literally, and to have those guys kind of at your fingertip and disposal for when we get into, as we move forward with the different events that we deal with and problems. I know I told Chief Dossinger and Captain Ciani this, there's just a lot of different resources out there for us that maybe we didn't have before, or some different perspectives on that end. So that was probably the best thing, most valuable thing, but on top of that, you know, we had some grade A speakers, A-list, as I referred to them to Chief Dossinger in my conversations when I was out there, from lead agents from the Boston bombing through the Orlando nightclub shooting, you name it, any major event that has occurred, literally dating back to the DC sniper shooting in the early 2000s. We had the lead agents and those in charge of come in and visit. So very special to be able to be a part of that as well.
Any other comments or questions? Sergeant Clauser. Well, congratulations. Awesome. I know what it's like to be away from your family for 10 weeks without a car.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Interesting.
Congratulations.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
okay, next up is engineering. Mr. Kubis.
Thank you, President Decker, Commissioners. Before you, there's actually two action items on here so for two upcoming projects, the 2018 mill and overlay and the 2018 seal coat. If you remember, around Thanksgiving time, the Commission had directed staff to put an RFP out for selecting engineers for those two projects. We did that and had received 3 proposals for each of the 2 projects. So we received a proposal from KLJ, Apex, and Highlands Engineering for both projects. We received those proposals back last week on the 3rd. Quickly put an ad hoc committee together of city staff to review those proposals and score those proposals on the 5th, on Friday, and that's why, unfortunately, this didn't make it into your packet. You have paper copies in front of you today, but The committee had scored these proposals, and by the way, I think they were the three of the best proposals we've seen in my time here. Very well done, put together. It was a tough time over the holidays, and all three firms really did a nice job with it. But the committee had selected KLJ for the 2018 mill and overlay project, and recommend selecting Highlands Engineering for the 2018 seal coat project. To get things moving along, we had asked both of those firms if they would be able to put agreements together for this meeting, and you have those as the paper copies with you. I would caveat the one from Highlands Engineering. They're using a new form of agreement that we think we'll be moving towards that form of agreement with all of our consultants shortly. It's just a new form that the EJCDC has put out. We haven't had a chance to review that as staff. We have had a short time to review the scope and fee they put together. But until Ms. Murtha and staff have had a little more chance, I guess what we would ask for on the Highlands Engineering selection would be to conditionally award that subject to approval of the terms in the contract. We want to make sure that everything in that agreement and the scope and fee that we're comfortable with. The KLJ agreement is their standard task order agreement. It's also the EJCDC contracts, but it's an older version that we've previously approved that master task order. As you can see, that their agreement is quite a bit smaller dollar-wise because we're just really scoping out the first phase of the project, which would be scoping out what streets we intend to mill and overlay, putting together some of our files on the very front end of the project. So that's a very small scope. We would hope in 2 weeks we would come back with the remainder of that scope and fee for the design and the construction engineering for that mill and overlay project. So I guess with that, I could answer any question that you'd have, and then I'll step back, and I think we probably need separate motions for each one of these projects.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Kubis on either one of these?
Mr. Kubis, I do. Mr. President?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I talked to you earlier about this here, just want to make sure we're looking at it the right way. On the Highlands Engineering, $136,000 for their engineering estimated on a estimated construction cost of $700,000. So we're looking at roughly 20%. Is that standard percentage cost for an engineering firm?
President Decker,
for a seal coat project, basically?
Commissioner Steiner, I would say that is a little bit higher than our last year's project. Highlands did the seal coat project for the city as well last year. This year, the difference being it's through the DOT, so there are some more procedural items that we need to do, more paperwork during construction. But as we go through the terms of this new form of agreement, I did speak with the representative from Highlands, and I think we can sit down and really go through that. We haven't done a DOT seal coat project in my time here, and it's been many years that the city's gone through that process. So I think it would be worth some time to really define what it is environmentally that we have to do on a seal coat project and the paperwork involved. But it is more time consuming than is if we're all local dollars.
Yeah. And we had one bid on each project. Is that what it was?
What we had was proposals, just requests for proposals.
Right.
Statement of qualifications, if you will. And we got that from 3 firms on each project.
Okay.
But then what we do in that process is we select the firm that had the best proposal in the selection committee's mind, and then entered into this negotiation.
I know we were talking about it earlier about the cost of some of our projects, the engineers and so on, and we are looking at that, and this is a case where I don't know if it's right. I think like I said, it's higher than last year's, and I think it's something we definitely got to take a look at. We don't have the money like we had before. So thank you.
Mr. Kubis, this selection committee, I guess I wasn't aware, was there a commissioner on the selection committee?
There was not.
Okay. We have no overall idea on the KLJ, what it's going to cost.
The KLJ, on the last sheet of that slightly larger packet is the project budget. And again, this is for the first phase, which would really be I'd call it the scoping phase, with preliminary estimates, to put some maps together, because we don't have a defined project limit or project area for the mill and overlay project. And that fee is $8,140.
Okay. Any further questions or comments for Mr. Kubis? Hearing none, I would look, first off, we'll go after task order number S12. I'd look for a motion on task order S12.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
We have a motion to approve S12
Second.
with a second. Any
For
further?
May I ask a quick question? For clarification, would that be subject to final agreement on contract terms?
Yes. I would
Okay.
amend to include that.
I'll still second that amendment.
Okay. So we have the initial motion with amendment
Yes.
and a second with the amendment. So any further questions or comments? And thank you for the clarification. Now we'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Mr. Altmans?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Task order S12 is approved. Next up would be task order number 201801-01 from Highlands Engineering. And I would look for a motion.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
with a second. This one with the caveat, with the
Subject.
amendments,
Two, yes.
subject to contract approval. Subject to contract approval, okay? Any further questions or comments? Go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Task order 201801-01 is approved.
Thank you.
That is it, Mr. Kubis?
I did have one other, just
Okay.
a brief update, if the commissioner would entertain it, to follow up on a task order that was recently approved this fall. We do have a draft of the traffic study that was approved by the commission. We have a meeting set up tomorrow with KLJ just to go over some of the language in that to more fully understand the recommendations they're making. But if we recall, this was really looking at the corridors of State Avenue, 30th Avenue West, and 21st Street, mainly with the new school, but with all the new development out west, to make sure that the traffic implementations that we've made are working correctly. And I think they do have some recommendations that we'll be bringing forth probably at the next meeting.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you. Next up, we have Public Works, report on recycling.
Good evening, President Decker and Commission. Tonight, Mr. Prowse is going to give, I guess, the final PowerPoint on, hopefully the final PowerPoint on the recycling. The Recycling Committee of President Decker and Mrs. Trustum met a couple times, familiar with the direction we decided to go on our costs and our budget. We put a lot of time into this, and Mr. Prowse will go through it. One of the things you will notice is that, hopefully you'll notice, is the dollars on the collection side for the residents is under $5 is what we're proposing. We're also proposing, is one of the options, and one of the options also is a $2 to $3 increase, maybe up to $4 increase at the landfill. Reason we did that is because the disposal part of the recyclables are probably one of the most expensive costs of transferring those dollars to the recycle facility. So we looked at as one fund, but then sharing those costs throughout throughout. That way also, that'll give some, I guess, skin in the game per se for other communities. And if that increases, then we'll have to look at costs there. So I probably said more than Aaron wanted me to, so I'll be here for questions, and Aaron will go through the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zuroff. Good evening, Commission, Mr. President and Commission. As Mr. Zuroff had said, we're here for hopefully our last PowerPoint on recycling. The intention behind this meeting tonight is to provide you with some valuable information to consider for consideration prior to your next commission meeting, which we will be asking for an action to be taken, which would be the January 22nd meeting. 2017 overall household tonnages coming into our landfill was 39,122 tons this past year. How that equates over, 17,400 tons of that was in city, 21,730 tons came from out of city haulers. When we say in city, we're talking both commercial, residential pickup that is completed by the city equipment and city staff. That's about 45% of the total tonnages. So we still are focusing on a regional landfill. There's a lot of small communities that also are bringing into us that are contributing to that other 55%. So as Mr. Zuroff had said, the recycling committee had met a few times. We had discussed the budget, came up with a budget proposal. These funds and capital expenses and operating expenses will be incorporated or are planned to be incorporated into our collections and disposal funds for solid waste program. We aren't looking at starting a recycling fund. It's after visiting with several other cities, we figured it would be easier to run them through solid waste collections and disposal. So what I provided you guys in your commission packets, the two split out budget proposals. I consolidated them for this PowerPoint. So capital expenses that we're looking at to start up recycling are in total of $786,000. As far as operating expenses go, we're looking at adding one full-time chief operator position that I'll get into detail a little bit on down the road. Other than that, it's just general operating supplies that you'll see on a yearly basis that come to a total of just about $30,000. That does include getting the materials to the MRF. As of right now, I am working on looking at a MRF out in Canada as well. We had 7 selections to choose from. One in Minneapolis, which we've talked about several times, Demcom Industries, is willing to take our materials. I just recently found another one that's out in Regina, Saskatchewan. So there's a recycling fund that was set aside in the city finances after working with Deputy Administrator Carlson. There is a total of just about $650,000 stuck into that fund. We are looking to use that to do some of the purchasing of our capital items, as example, the recycling containers, GPS AVL system, the compaction unit, and also the building restructure. So the remaining balance after taking out what we were looking at purchasing would be about $5,700. So what does that all mean to the resident? Looking at the overall costs, the two areas, the $46 and $47 per ton is what we would be recommending to our residents, which would equate over to $475 or $425 per month per household utility account.
And Mr. Prouse, just for clarification, we're right at 44 right now.
Correct. So what we did here is our current landfill rate right now for tipping household materials is $44 a ton. As Mr. Zuroff had stated earlier, to split some of the costs into the disposal side, we want to raise our tipping fee to either $46 or $47 a ton, which would in turn lower the cost to the resident to the amounts that we have shown.
Mr. Prouse, I know during our committee meetings, we were discussing other rates in surrounding communities. What did we find?
Slide 2.
Okay, sorry.
So as I said, this does include the collections and disposal of the recyclable materials. And keep in mind that if obviously the cost to dispose of the recyclable materials would increase, we would need to also increase our cost to our residents. we do plan to review this on an annual basis. As Ms. Jennings said, or Ms. Trustum had just brought up, City of Fargo right now is at $43 a ton. This is household tipping charges. City of Grand Forks is about $49.37, Bismarck 45, Jamestown 56. City of Mandan has a landfill, but they do not take household materials there. They charge their residents $5.80 a month for recycling only. City of Minot's at $40 a ton at their landfill. They currently are not working on recycling, or they currently do not have a recycling plan. 2019, they're looking at implementation of one. And City of Williston is at $42 a ton.
Mr. Press, how many of these cities have the same kind of structure that we have? I mean, we have 23 communities that utilize our landfill. How many of these cities have that same sort of?
There's only 13 MSW landfills in the state of North Dakota, so all of them operate on the same basis. We probably have the largest area because we're made up of a lot smaller communities. But we all operate pretty much on the same basis. They're city-owned landfills, but they're basically regional operation.
Okay.
Mr. Prowl, since Mandan doesn't take any, what did you call it? They don't take
Household waste?
So does everything go to Bismarck?
Correct. Their household waste is collected by, I believe, Waste Management.
Oh, okay.
And it's taken care of through that. And Waste Management also has just been awarded, after the buyout of Dakota Sanitation, the recycling contract for City of Mandan. And all those materials are going over to City of Bismarck, where they are transferred to a larger MRF. That's owned by Waste Management.
Okay, thank you.
So as I said earlier, we're looking at doing a lot of marketing. We're planning to hire a recycling coordinator, which would be that chief operator position that you'd see in the budget. And the individual will be responsible for the research, public outreach, and education programs for the recycling purposes. We plan to have some public informational meetings, which would begin about 1 month prior to the recycling startup. We plan to reach out to the schools, to educate the children on recycling techniques and benefits, and then utilization of some brochures and information that would be provided to us by the MRFs that we would decide to use. My administrative assistant, Deborah Walworth, is working on some looking for grants for us as well. She has recently found 2 of them. Our pre-application for the USDA Rural Development Grant has been successful. She had just recently sent in all the remaining information, actually today. And we're looking at a $100,000 grant to help provide technical assistance and training, informational, educational materials, marketing, promotional items, and such like that. That grant will be available from October 1st to September 30th of 2019. The second one she recently came across was a recycling partnership. We are still working on a current dollar amount there. Again, that grant will provide some educational information and technical advice. It will cover some of the best practices of what other communities and operations have seen, and it also helps with funding some of the carts. They offer a certain dollar amount per cart on that one. Grant period will be 18 months from the time that grant is awarded. We are looking somewhere in probably the June or July to find out if we receive anything off that grant. So as we talked at the last meeting, with the rear load coming to, with recycling coming in, the rear load will go away. Tentative end date would be mid-May 2018 upon the completion of the spring cleanup event that would take place. Reasons why, so that we could spend time with route restructuring as we're bringing in a whole new program into our department. We'd like to look at all of our current operations and do some route restructuring to make them more operational friendly, especially for the new employees. We'll be retraining all of our route operators for those about those changes, and then we'll assist with the recycling rollout and set up procedures with recycling. So how does that all look in a timeline? This meeting, in January, it will be this meeting for the update. The next meeting will be for the approval of the recycling plan and recycling coordinator position. Plan to do some advertising for that position in January. February, we'll look at advertising the equipment and containers. In March, we'll hire a recycling coordinator. We'll have a commission meeting for the approval of the equipment and container bids. Mid-May, there will be a spring cleanup week, and the rear load will be eliminated shortly following that. June through August, we'll be doing some route restructuring and retraining of the operators on those route changes. September would be implementation of the startup procedures, doing some public outreach with the community via a program through the city hall here or even at the schools. October will be our kickoff of our residential recycling program, and then November through December, I would do some more work on researching options for apartments and commercial buildings for implementation. So along with recycling, we also had some discussion on some other recommendations. Some special accommodations could be made to those that were unable to haul their own materials. Suggested price would be $20 per requested pickup, looking at the staff and the equipment that it would take to go out to each resident to pick that material up. We would have to put a limit of, like, say 10 40-gallon bags or one furniture item per request. Obviously, no tires or appliances are accepted at the curb. Must call in 1 day prior to pickup to schedule. Must call in 1 day prior to your scheduled pickup day, or utilize our Dickinson Works app, which has already been implemented, and we could get it onto a schedule so that we aren't backtracking all the time. That next day, the operators would know which routes or which additional houses need an additional pickup. We did talk about the spring and fall cleanup weeks. I'm working with Mr. Selly from the Dickinson Fire Department on setting some dates. The fall cleanup will actually be something new to Dickinson. So it's an addition, and we're working together to come up with a plan for those dates as well. During the spring and fall cleanup, there will be no charge for household materials, as we always have done in the past. And again, we will utilize the same situation as if you had a special accommodation where you need to call 1 day prior to your scheduled pickup day. Residents can utilize the Baylor Building and the recycle sites that are available for drop-off or for materials. Each site is labeled as to what is acceptable at those sites. We are looking at putting cameras on those locations with our 2018 budget. And then we are extending the hours at the Baylor Building. In the summertime, which would be basically May through October. It's 7 to 6 Monday through Friday, 8 to 2 on Saturday. Wintertime, it would be 7 to 5 Monday through Friday and closed Saturday and Sunday. Those hours did get extended slightly. It's based off of some of our past historical data, knowing when our residents and our customers are coming at the best time. So, some future expansions would be in the inclusion of the outside communities. Once the City of Dickinson has a plan implemented that is effective and efficient, we look to include the outside communities to get them to bring materials to us to recycle. So the participation will assist with maintaining lower landfill disposal rates, and then what we'll need to do is just establish a disposal fee for those outside communities for getting rid of their recyclables. Some upcoming actions I will need from you. Our next meeting, we plan to bring our recommended budget changes and fee amendments to the table. That will be presented here to the commission, and then we'll need approval at the January 22nd meeting. If you have any questions, Mr. Zuroff and I are available.
Mr. President.
Mr. Stein?
Mr. Prowse, I see your budget, your operating expenses, capital expenses. I don't see any revenue estimate. What's your estimated revenue for this project?
The revenue will be driven by that 475 or 425 per.
What's your estimate? How many containers?
About 7,000 households.
At 575 a household?
475.
475? 7,000, 28,000 a month?
That's per month.
Per month, 28,000, okay.
The recommended rates are, that's where we played with the proposed, or the estimated income. So maybe we can go back to that first slide of the rates, and I think that's one thing we need to decide, or would like to decide tonight, so we can bring approval for the next meeting.
570.
Is, we'd look at probably the $46 a ton and
Okay.
$475 per household, or the 47 a ton and $425 a household is what we as staff are recommending.
In 7,000 households, huh?
Correct.
So after 1 year, we'll get a pretty good idea of where we're at on all.
And that will cover our operating, and one other thing I wanted to say, it's our capital expenses. I think one of the reasons we can lower it this much is we have that recycling fund, which is buying a lot of the capital expenses. So that really does help, using that recycling fund to bring some of those capital expenses down. So operations, we pretty much know it's basically half of what we're doing now per month, so it was pretty easy to dial that in. It's gonna take some time to train everybody, but operating expenses, we pretty much know. The hauling is some question marks there, but.
Yeah, you know, with a revenue of 28,000 a month, looking at your operating expenses, should come out 120,000 a year to the black.
Right, and I think Ms. Pross can probably talk more about it. You know, the recycling's, or that's a commodity too, and, you know, price of fuel, depending on, and we're hoping to get the rate of hauling it for those.
We can come out to
estimated
the
dollars,
black
too.
on something like that. We can adjust those rates every
Exactly.
year for the residents. I mean,
Exactly.
at $4, whatever it was, I think, you know, we were talking at 6 at one time.
Yep.
That's a big amount for some residents
And
over a year's
We
time.
really try to get that dollar amount down,
Yeah,
so.
super.
And we have options. You can look at the scale there. I mean, we can go from what's recommended 46, 47 or higher, but we also have to take into consideration what other regional landfills are charging. And in my opinion, the 46 or 47, whatever we would decide on, is not that far out along.
Yeah. We're gonna have to put out some pretty good education, what it's gonna cost them to have additional items picked up, you know, with that rear load, without the rear load, whatever, because I think there's people that are gonna have to use that service. They
Correct.
Have it available.
And that's why we put it there. We threw a number at it. As I said earlier, we do have labor that's involved in that. You have your truck expenses that's involved in it. And then we also had to put a limit to it because you recall at the last commission meeting I was at, I showed you some pictures where there's 2-3 pickup loads of materials laying out in front. We want to try to eliminate that. We want people to utilize those recycling sites for that yard waste material as it's intended for.
Yeah.
If it goes to those recycling sites, then we can take it to the landfill and compost it.
Yeah, and the sooner we can get it for the outside communities, the better, because it looks like they're using more of our landfill than the city is.
Correct.
And that's been basically what's been going on probably the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Mr. President, I just had a question. In the past presentations, we talked about when we eliminate the rear load, we were gonna free up some manpower. And most of those presentations, we discussed we would probably be able to handle this without hiring anybody else. This is the first time now I've seen this chief operator position get added in. Can you explain to me why that's a necessary position?
At first, we were looking at maybe taking one of the operators, and, you know, in fact, Mr. Prowse said, well, we'll just have a senior help run the recycling program. This is gonna be bigger than a senior operator position. We need somebody to come in and market this and do a lot more work than a senior position would. And it was my recommendation to have a chief level or a marketing coordinator, recycling coordinator to do this. You know, this is part of the hard part, but the implementation is gonna be difficult too. And getting the education out there. We want, you know, and right now we don't have that position, those people to do that. And so that's why we plugged in that position. And it was my recommendation, and after discussing with Aaron, we agreed that we need more than a senior. We need to implement it right. We need to get the information out there, and we need somebody at a little higher level.
Okay.
And you'll also need someone fielding calls, because there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of concerns as you roll this out, and you can't have you or your other staff dedicating all the time to that. So you will need a dedicated person that public can go to get the information and the resources to.
I guess my concern would be once we're past the marketing phase
Mhm.
and the education phase, then what does this position transition to?
I guess I'm looking at it at the chief level, and I would say that it would be a chief of recycling and a recycling coordinator. We did have that position at one point, and we've gone without it by hiring another admin assistant, but I think with recycling, we'll need that. I mean, I think the initial big surge of putting information out will be there, but I think this is a continuing effort. I don't think it's just going to be done. I think
Okay.
there'll be other markets that we can look at different things to do. That's just my opinion.
Oh, we have to tackle the apartments and commercial also,
Exactly.
so.
And other
And other
communities.
communities.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Ms. Carlson, can you tell us how the money came to be in the recycling account, how we ended up with the budget that we have to do the expenses for rolling this out?
Commissioner Altman, yes, we have reserve funds, and those reserve funds have been set aside for dedication of things. And as we were cleaning up the funds, working on them, we came across this recycling fund that was part of the solid waste reserve fund. And it was dedicated down, way down below, but we found that there was $650,000 that was set aside on part of the solid waste actual reserves that was set aside just for the recycling. So way back when, I can't tell you when it started, but they were actually setting aside money for a recycling program through the solid waste, and it was just set aside, but it's always never separated out of there. But the more we dug into it, we found it was part of their actual reserves.
Well, I'm just blown away because we've been working on this for so long. Part of our concern has always been, as Carson brings up, the expense for our people on fixed income. And we know that recycling is the right way to go as a community, but our biggest concern as a commission was how to implement it without breaking the bank and putting it on the backs
It's
of.
definitely not the same horse we started out with.
No.
We changed horses at the finish line.
And so at this point, it makes sense that we have this capital so that we as a city can afford to buy the equipment that we need to implement it and not have it as a huge expense for people. And some will be very gung-ho on this and others will be a little lackluster, but I think it's a very economical way for us to go about doing this, and kudos, that's very good.
Any other comments or questions? I would echo what Commissioner Altman says. You guys have done an outstanding job, so.
Thank you, President Decker. I guess one of the things, it'll be budget amendments, fee schedule changes, and I guess, do we need to determine the exact rate you want to go with? Or
Well, I guess we can open that up for discussion, what the commissioners
I guess it's
feel
not-
comfortable at,
that we can bring to the next meeting, I
Right.
guess.
some guidance for them.
Mr. President, Mr. Zuroff, when's the last time we increased our tipping rates? And do you remember what they were?
2000, I think in 2016, it was 42 a ton, and we
Okay.
went to 44.
And then before that, you know?
I believe Deputy Administrators Carlson is looking it up for us.
Now, that's one question we didn't foresee.
It was 40 before.
I think it was 40 for quite a long time.
I believe it's in the materials, the notes from the notes from the recycling committee.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay, yep. I see 2017, 44, 2014, 42, and 2013 was 40, 2012 was 38. So it's been 4 years now in 2018 since we've raised our tipping rates. And over that 4 years, it was an increase of $2. So personally, I would be comfortable with either.
Right?
So I'm gonna say I would side with 47.
Commissioners?
I don't think I have an issue with that.
That sounds like a good place to land for me too.
I think you have some guidance on it at 47.
Perfect.
And just to point out as well, Mr. Decker, or President Decker, at between the 46 and 47, we're pretty much midline with the rest of the state, after doing some research.
Mr. President, I would just like to thank Ms. Walworth too for all of her work. I know she found these great grant opportunities, which that would be so wonderful if we received them. And it'll alleviate some of those marketing costs that we have in the budget. So tell her thank you from us for sure.
We will definitely pass that to her. She has been working diligently to get us some extra funds.
Definitely.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have nothing from planning tonight, nothing in building and codes. Item 10, public issues of city concern not on the agenda. If there is anyone in the audience that has any concern that pertains to the city, please come forward, state your name. We'll allow you to hear your concerns. Seeing nothing or no one from the public has any concerns, we'll close that public issues. We'll move on to commission. The first thing up on the commission is I had requested from commissioners the yearly evaluation for Mr. Kessel, and I compiled the evaluation, and I'll just go through Mr. Kessel's performance review of 2017, and this is a composite from the 5 commissioners. Mr. Kessel is graded on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 would be poor, 2 fair, 3 satisfactory, 4 good, 5 excellent. And he is graded in job knowledge, work quality, leadership relationships, initiative, communication skills, and dependability. In the job knowledge, commissioners rated him at a 4.6. Work quality, 3.4. Leadership or relationships, 2.9. Initiative, 4.1. Communication skills, 3.3. And dependability, 3.8. Some of the comments from commissioners on job knowledge: he is a strong source for information, very good understanding needs of the city, and strong knowledge of his position. In work quality, Mr. Kessel worked great on the early loan repayment and defining commission goals. Mr. Kessel juggles many titles and on different boards and associations, and we would like to see that that by all those titles, that in different boards, that he makes it a priority to be present at the city commission. Be it that out-of-town commitments be kept at a minimum, and continue to work on that process. His leadership relationships, he's a champion for the city of Dickinson. Excellent on community relations, continue to work on employee relationships. And we're looking for a little bit more, and I think this is a whole staff thing when we come to the budget process, a little bit more financial leadership. So, and that's a continued process. We saw that tonight with the audit. So it's important. Initiative. Mr. Kessel is always looking ways to improve Dickinson, and he's great at prioritizing needs. Communication skills. Sean has a great working relationship with local and outside organizations, plus all media outlets. His strongest skill set by far. His communication with city commissioners must remain a priority, and weekly memos would be a plus. And dependability. Mr. Kessel is a very dependable employee. Stronger areas And when he sets his mind to it, he gets the task done. His work ethic is second to none, but he needs to take some downtime, and that is my comment. He needs to take some vacation. Make sure, again, to attend all commission meetings, and his attention to detail is always something we all can work on. And I will sign this and pass it down to Mr. Kessel. And we have one other task at hand, and that is item 2 on the commission agenda. Mr. Kessel is in his final year of his contract with the City of Dickinson. Mr. Kessel, how long have you worked for us?
9 years.
9 years, okay. He is in his 9th year. So currently, on his final contract, we are beginning contract negotiations for new contract. As listed, there is the possibility that we could go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations, or I guess I would leave it to the desire of the commission. And if they have any comments before we would decide on a motion.
I guess just from my perspective, been in and involved with Sean's contract negotiations for 8 of the 9 years that you have been here. And I guess one of the things I pride ourselves on as a commission is that we haven't had to go to executive decision, that we've been able to generally do this as a body. My recommendation after getting the email to look into the contract and bring forward anything that we're concerned with or that we'd like to see in the contract is that as a commission we would come up with some things that are important to us and then hand that back to city attorney and HR to craft a contract so that and this is just me talking, the mayor and Mr. Kessel have an opportunity to again review the contract, come to terms with it, iron out any details, final contract to be brought back to us as commissioners to be able to look over and give our approval. In the past, that's kind of how the process had worked, is that the mayor and city administrator and the team would come up with a contract. It'd be presented to us as a commission. We always had a chance to give input, especially on, I can remember some really frank discussions on salary and benefits and those types of details. It's probably for Sean the most uncomfortable time of the year is when we're going through the evaluation and the contract negotiation. I can tell you from a historical standpoint for me, one caveat of the contract that I have not fully endorsed was it's always been a 3-year contract, which is fine. It gives some stability for us as a commission, knowing that we have a 3-year contract with the city administrator. Gives the city administrator some knowledge that your job is secure, especially because your contract always crosses over the changing of a commission or the potential changing of either a mayor or a commissioner. So there, I can see why we have that. What I've never understood is why when we have a 3-year contract, it's not a 3-year contract, because it's always a rolling 1-year contract that's renewed every year and extended out another year. So just
What's the notification of that contract? 3-year, it's a 1-year contract, correct? 1 year at a time?
No.
3 years? No.
It is
Straight 3 years.
straight.
3-year, but we renewed it every year.
Okay.
And then it extended another year.
Okay, and
It's
what,
the first time
what is
since I've
our,
been here.
what is our options to end the contract?
That's differed. At one point, it was 3 out of 5 of us voting to dismiss, and then it was changed to 4 out of 5. Now, I really don't care what that number is. That doesn't make any difference to me, because I think if it got to a point where it was time to let Sean go, it would be a consensus among the board. I don't think You know, one of the reasons you have it 4 out of 5 is in case you had a sweeping change of the commission, there was an axe to grind, and so I can see why we have that, but I just don't understand why we don't have a contract and you play it out for the 3 years, and then you set down in that last year and renew another contract for moving forward. That's the only hangup I've ever had.
And this has been the first time since I've been the president of the commission that we have not done that.
Yep.
We did not.
So to get this straight, with the 3-year contract, the way we're doing it now is we're addressing his salary every year.
Right.
Basically.
You want to go to 3-year with one salary?
I don't even care if it's one salary or if you build in a 3-year contract, this is the salary with a whatever percent cost. I don't care how we get there so much.
This is about the first year I've got, you know, normally the president has come back and said, we met, I've looked at it, here's what I recommend.
Right.
That's the way it's been for 18 years that I've been here.
Right.
See,
You know, that's what I
that-
was kind of expecting
That's,
tonight.
that's my issue,
And I would
issue
like
with it.
I don't mind that at all, because if I had a problem, I would be able to talk to either one of you two before we did this here. So I would like to see you, Mr. Commissioner Oltmans, meet with Sean, come back with an agreement, and
Give you time to look
Present.
over it, see if there's anything that
Yeah.
you don't agree with.
yeah,
And
I think that's fair to Sean, I think it's fair to us.
But
what would
that-
you like to do, Mayor? It's
I think
your
there,
show.
I think there are things that need to be, we need to have a frank discussion about within the contract.
Well, I think so, because Sean just got those totals there. He should have a chance to visit with you guys if we determine that you two should meet with him.
Mr.
Discuss.
President, I've had conversations with Commissioner Frederick and Sean, so I kind of understand the direction in some ways that he wants to take. I think that executive session doesn't have to be a brown stain
Right.
on what we do as a commission. This is an HR thing that is our responsibility as the city commission, and that's what its purpose is for. There are clear guidelines when going into executive session, and you can't breach out of those, or you,
Right.
you know, you have the Attorney General that will come after you, and we don't want that. I think that having an opportunity for us to speak openly in an HR perspective and go through this item by item, I mean, I think that that's an advantage for us to make sure that we support the contract that we are going to be providing Mr. Kessel. And it allows us an opportunity to speak openly because, you know, in most cases, HR negotiations aren't aired publicly. And
Right.
so I think that that's also a benefit as well.
So what would you like to see?
I am supportive of going into an executive session to discuss the contract. I think that that's a part of our role, is to be more involved.
Okay.
And that just means we turn off the camera, you know, press can't report on it, we discuss.
We do record it because it is subject to the Attorney General's review.
But we don't project it on Channel 19.
No, it would just
Everybody,
be
it's
us
just off.
5 and Attorney Murtha.
The audience can stay in.
No, they leave, everyone leaves.
Well, I don't know if that's right.
Well,
Sat on-
Executive session.
We can ask Ms. Murtha, but I've sat on boards where we've done both, and it's just, it seems like commissioners have a different comfort level in executive session and speak more candidly and openly than if they would in front of the whole group of people, 100 people in
The
the
city.
audience or whatever. So I am more in favor of going to an executive session than I am not, because I've sat on both and I see the benefit of it, so.
And to Mr. Steiner's concerns, this is allowable. This is nothing new. This is allowable by law.
Well, I understand that. Are we correct that those people have to leave during an executive session?
Mr. President, members of the commission, yes, during an executive session, the purpose is to have a conversation that is confidential. So only the governing body and any support staff that's needed to conduct the executive session is allowed to remain in it. It is also correct to say that the recording of that is maintained for at least 6 months, but that recording is not shared unless there is a review request by the Attorney General or a court orders it to be shared. So everyone would have to exit, a different tape would be involved, and then when it was completed, you would come back into open session. The public would be invited back in, but that period of time would be recorded but not released to the public. And just to clarify, the contract negotiation exception for executive session is available to you to use if you so like. The important thing to note is that the governing body can only use this if it is of a fiscal advantage, or it would be a fiscal disadvantage to not go into executive session. So you are discussing negotiating strategy for the contract. It's not just for a confirmation of terms.
Okay.
And during that, Mr. Kessel would not be in here
No.
as well.
It would be the commission and Mrs. Martha. That would be it.
And the individual providing the technical assistance.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I'm fine.
I
Okay.
don't have strong feelings
Okay.
one way or another.
Well, I would look for a motion, and it has to be worded correctly, the motion.
State the legal authority and the
Right.
purpose of the executive session on the record.
So,
So how would it need to be worded?
Would be a move for executive session pursuant to 4404-19.1 subdivision 9 and 4404-19.2 for the purpose of discussing negotiating strategy for the city administrator contract.
I would make that motion.
Second.
okay. We have a motion for executive session pursuant to 44-04-19-1, paragraph 9, and 44-04-19-2 with a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Friedrich?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We will move to executive session.
We could have a moment to clear the room.
Yeah, let's go. There's a basketball game.
Football game, you mean? Championship game, right? Football game, you mean?
I figured
Football
that
game, you
would
mean?
happen.
National basketball.
National, it's football. Georgia and Alabama.
Tonight.
Yeah, it's football though, not basketball.
Oh, you're right. Football. What? Yeah.
Roll Tide.
Second time today I was thinking basketball. Okay.
Okay. Did everybody, did Linda leave?
Yes, everybody abandoned you.
I'm just glad this isn't a ship.
Well, national championship game is on.
That's right.
That's
So
true.
you lost Dusty and a couple of guys because of that.
We are now back in the public session.
Okay, for the record, we have exited executive session, and I have received negotiation instructions from the commission. We'll go forward with negotiations with Mr. Kessel on his contract for city administrator.
Okay.
Since we are done with section 11, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.